Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
You are now entering the pit for the last time in 2023. Welcome to Squared Circle Pit here on KNOTFEST. It's Rob flying solo today because I want to talk about my best matches, my favorite matches, I should say, of 2023. This is a year, maybe the first year in my wrestling fandom, where I felt a little overwhelmed with the amount of pro wrestling on television nowadays. I almost sometimes found it hard to catch up. Like there would be some weekends where there would be a WWE pay-per-view and New Japan show plus AEW Collision, and Sunday I only have so many hours. I want to watch all the matches. How do I keep up? So we as wrestling fans are very spoiled nowadays. We have so many options, so many resources, so many places to watch wrestling. Back as a kid, I only had like 2-3 hours a week I could watch just because I didn't have cable. Now it's like 3 hours a day at least. I'm not complaining. I love it. And I want to thank you for being a Squared Circle Pit fan this year. If this is your first episode or if you've been checking me out all year, all of my interviews, I really appreciate all your support, all your listening, all your fandom. And without you, obviously, none of this would be possible. Of course, you could always hit me up on Twitter at Rob Pasbani and, of course, at Squared Circle Pit. On Twitter, there is no E in circle. And let me know what your favorite matches of the year are. So I'm going to kick it off with Mercedes Moné versus Willow. This was for the New Japan IWGP Women's Championship. Oh, no. This was for I'm confusing myself now. This was for the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. They created a second women's title in New Japan Pro Wrestling this year. And I believe the reason this was created was so that Mercedes Moné could have a belt of her own to tour in the States, or that they could have a belt in the States for women to wrestle for, because the IWGP women's title would primarily be defended in Japan. Everyone assumed that Mercedes Moné would be winning the match because she is the bigger star. And that's what I assumed. And it was a great match between Mercedes and Willow. It was really, really cool to see Willow get the spotlight here. I think that she's very underutilized in AEW. I think she could be a huge star. She's a natural babyface. She exudes charisma. The fans love her, even when fans don't even know who she is. By the end of the match, I feel like they're all about Willow Nightingale. So if you've seen the match, you know how it went. Obviously, all this is going to have spoilers. I don't think it's a big deal to do spoilers now that these matches are almost a year old. Of course, at the end of the match, Mercedes seemed to recognize that she had busted her ankle or her leg. And while she was the planned winner of the match, Mercedes called an audible. And it was, in fact, Willow Nightingale who beat Mercedes Moné to become the first New Japan Strong Women's Champion. And even without that controversial finish, I thought it was a really, really fun match. Mercedes is one of my favorite women active on the roster right now. So it's always so cool to see her in action. I hope we see way more of her in 2024. And so far, she had great matches in 2023. And she made Willow here, I think. Willow became a huge star. It's a little unfortunate that New Japan and AEW didn't really capitalize off of this. And eventually Willow lost the title to, I believe, Julia. And so hopefully we'll get a Julia Mercedes Moné match. I know that's something that New Japan wanted to set up for a while, but we don't know now. Currently, Mercedes' status is unknown. She's negotiating with AEW, allegedly, with WWE. She wants a lot of money from WWE, which I think she deserves it because, like I said, Mercedes is one of my all-time favorites. So we'll see where Mercedes ends up, but regardless of where she ends up, she is going to have some of the best matches of the year because Mercedes is money. Now, the next match I want to read, I'm going in reverse order from least favorite to most favorite. I'm going to end up on my most favorite match, going all the way to All In. All In, just in terms of spectacle of events, may have been my favorite event of the year, just because it was so cool to see a large 80,000 strong stadium show that wasn't a WWE show. That wasn't WrestleMania. That was a non-WWE stadium show. It makes me so excited for the future of wrestling. And I want to be clear, not that I don't love seeing a WWE stadium show. It was almost just surreal to see the sea of humanity out there for non-WWE wrestling. That's what I mean. And I'm excited to see it again this year. Of all the matches on All In, there's going to be one match that shows up on this this countdown here. And it's the opening match of the pay-per-view. It was tough to pick just one match from this event. This is the match I went with. CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. Now, this was the first match of the show, and it was maybe the most newsworthy match on the card. This was CM Punk's last match in AEW. Moments before coming out for this match, CM Punk got in a fight, allegedly, with Jungle Boy Jack Perry, beat him up. He allegedly threatened Tony Khan to the point that Khan says he feared for his life. CM Punk then quit the company for a second and said he wasn't going to go out there. And this was as the event was starting, as the graphics were playing, the fireworks were going off, and CM Punk isn't going to come out. Finally, Samoa Joe, who was his opponent, came out and was like, hey, man, listen, I want to wrestle. Like, I understand you have your problems, but, like, could you do this for me? I like to wrestle in front of this crowd. I haven't had a large match like this in a very long time. And so CM Punk said, you know what? For you, Joe, anything. And so they went out there and they had a banger of a match. It was a great opening match. That could have been the main event of the card. And it's crazy watching the match back, knowing that CM Punk knows this is likely his last match in AEW. And as far as he could tell, maybe his last match ever, because he didn't know if he was going to go back to WWE at the time. And Punk laid it out all in the ring. It was an awesome match. Punk was bleeding a little. Joe did all of his signature moves. And while Punk, I remember, tried to do a go to sleep on Joe a week or two prior on Dynamite and couldn't really get him up. So I thought they had a very clever finish for this match, which is Punk winning with a top rope Pepsi plunge, which is the pedigree from Triple H, coincidentally. This was a fun match. These two are absolute pros. They've wrestled before. Hopefully we'll one day see them wrestle again. But this is the match that stuck out the most for me from the All In pay-per-view. And if there's one match to go back to watch, I think this is the one from that show. Moving up the card, we have a television match. This is El Hijo de Vikingo versus Kenny Omega from AEW Dynamite in March. I heard a lot about El Hijo de Vikingo, and I was very, very excited to see him spotlighted in a featured main event bout on AEW. This match was originally scheduled to happen in Mexico last year, but Kenny Omega got injured and could not fulfill his obligation. So I guess for Tony Khan, the first opportunity he got to book this match, he booked it. And it was really, really great. This wasn't my first exposure to Vikingo, but I feel like the first time I really saw him in a full match setting. I knew some of the moves from seeing clips on Twitter, but he couldn't have had a better opponent than Kenny Omega. Omega knew what made Vikingo great, and he made sure to give Vikingo plenty of time to showcase all of his insane acrobatics. And that's exactly what he did. And it was so cool to watch for me because I knew a week or two later I would be seeing Vikingo live in person at the WrestleMania weekend events, all the peripheral events around WrestleMania weekend. And it's safe to say that Vikingo was the MVP of that weekend. He must have wrestled 3 or 4 times a night. There was one time I saw him wrestle twice in one night. And he was just as crisp, just as sharp both times, doing a lot of the same insane technical maneuvers. And it was so interesting for me as a hardcore fan who kind of could put together like, oh, this is where he's setting up, to instead of focusing on the match and focusing on how he performed the move, knowing what move was coming and that I didn't necessarily need to see the move again, I was instead focused on the crowd and watching how they would react, not knowing where Vikingo was going, because this, for a lot of the people, was the first time they saw him. Not everyone is a dork like me and taking in 7 wrestling events in one day during WrestleMania weekend. So that was a really cool moment. And I would say that this was arguably the moment that Vikingo arrived in America, was in this March match with Kenny Omega. If you haven't seen a Vikingo match, this one or the match with Black Taurus at Ring of Honor Final Battle from last week are definitely the ones you should check out. Next, we have the award for Best Strap Match of the Year. Bryan Danielson versus Ricky Starks. Now, Bryan Danielson, spoiler, is going to be showing up a few times on this list because, believe it or not, he's a great freaking wrestler. And easy to say, this may be the most vicious strap match I've ever seen. I love this match. I think this match really took Ricky Starks to the next level. This match was actually originally scheduled to be CM Punk versus Ricky Starks, but of course Punk got fired from the company and Starks was left without an opponent. And this is when Bryan Danielson stepped up and took over the role, took over the angle, and it couldn't have worked out any better, all things considered. This match was incredibly violent. This was one of the best matches in Collision history. And for me personally, seeing live choking is always difficult to watch. And that's exactly how this match ended. And Ricky Starks completely played into it as well, because you could see his face turning not even red. It was like purple before he had to tap out. And you can't really fake that. You got to just take the choke. So I really give credit to Ricky Starks for showing just how tough he is. We all know how tough and crazy Bryan Danielson is, so we don't have to give him credit there. But this was a wonderful, wonderful match. A wonderfully violent match. I don't know if violence and blood can be described as wonderful, but I guess I just did it. Next, in WWE, we have Bianca Belair versus Io Sky from May 6th at the WWE Backlash in Puerto Rico. And this, if we're talking about my favorite event of the year, I think it was this one, specifically for the crowd. The Puerto Rican crowd was incredible here. And this was almost the first sign of it during the show because Puerto Rico loved Io Sky. And they wanted to see Io win the title here. They were rooting for Io, even though Bianca was the face. And the two of them, it created such a unique environment for the match. And in general, these two work very, very well together. I could see these two wrestling all the time. And it was just a really, really fun match. And it was just a sign of things to come. So I want to give a shout out to that one. And 1 month before at WrestleMania, Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley, the penultimate match of night one. Some people say this should have been the main event of night one. And this was the best women's match in WWE, I would say, of the year. These are two top-of-the-line pros. I think Charlotte, it's very crazy to me that Charlotte is now the veteran. You know, she's been in WWE proper for almost a decade now, which is a little crazy to think. I think it's been like 8 or 9 years now that she's been wrestling on the main roster. And Rhea Ripley is like the new Charlotte. She's like the modern up-and-coming main eventer. And in a way, I feel like the torch was passed here a little bit. Because ever since WrestleMania, Charlotte kind of took a more reserved role. She's kind of in a more of a legend role now, kind of helping Bianca on SmackDown, as opposed to being the main focus of storylines. And also, Charlotte herself spent a good amount of time this year on the injured reserve list. So there wasn't a lot of time to focus on her. Meanwhile, Rhea Ripley, arguably the top star on Raw. She's claimed herself as the leader of Judgment Day. And she's taken the ball and run with it now to where she's one of WWE's top stars. And what I love about Rhea Ripley is she's presenting this very non-traditional way of femininity. You know, she is mommy. She's dominant. She's tough. She's not afraid. And she kicks ass. And I love Rhea Ripley, and I can't wait to see where WWE takes her character next. Then we have the best tag team match of the year. I'm calling it. I'm calling it, folks. The best tag team match of the year happened on Collision on July 15th, 2023. It was FTR, Cash Wheeler, and Dax Hardwood against Bullet Club Gold, Jay White, and Juice Robinson. This was a best 2 out of 3 falls tag team match. Now, I actually, there's a part of me that thought maybe the match that they had the week prior was a little better, but I say that until I got to the last 10 minutes or so of this match. Jay White in general, I feel, is very, very underrated. We're only just starting to see in AEW how great he is. I've seen it for a long time with how great he was in New Japan at the top of the card, or when he was even at the middle of the card. He always delivered great matches, and he always made his opponents look stronger at the end. He didn't really have that much time to shine in the first half of the year in AEW, but I think that all changed in the second half of the year, especially once Collision got started and he got a whole platform for himself and his buddies. And he and Juice Robinson do very, very well as a tag team. They know each other super well. They were both young boys coming up in New Japan, so I'm sure they have a lot of history together. And they worked great with FTR. This was like an old school Midnight Express versus Rock and Roll Express type of Southern wrestling match. I did not know where this was headed. And my favorite type of match is when by the end of it, I'm rooting against the baby faces because I want to see a title change. And that's exactly what I did. I was like, wow, this is so great. Wouldn't it be insane if Juice Robinson and Jay White won the match? They unfortunately did not win the match, but it absolutely did not detract from my enjoyment of this match. This is a great match. It goes like an hour, so you gotta set some time to watch it. But it was very, very good, and especially the final quarter of the match, the last 15 minutes or so, are just top of the line pro wrestling that you need to check out. Then we have the best triple threat of the year. And that also happened at WrestleMania. WrestleMania has actually the most matches on my list of best matches. And this match is the hardest match. This match went super hard. It was Drew McIntyre versus Gunther versus Sheamus for the IC title at WrestleMania. Going into the show, this was one of my most anticipated matches. And in general, what I love about Gunther in WWE is he presents a match style that nobody in WWE seems to be doing, which is akin to perhaps European strong style. It's a tough, hard-hitting match, lots of stiff slaps and elbows and punches and kicks. And I feel like Gunther brought out the best in his two opponents here, especially Sheamus. He'd been feuding with Sheamus for almost a year now. They had an incredible match the year prior, Clash at the Castle. Honestly, Gunther got me into Sheamus because for the longest time, Sheamus didn't really connect with me, but it wasn't until he was doing these like crazy slugger matches with Gunther and I guess also with Drew prior that I was like, you know what? Sheamus freaking rules. And this match was everything I wanted. These guys, I mean, bleeding chests from chops. Their faces were all red. They did not take it easy on each other. And I assumed going into this that we might have seen a title change because of the triple threat rules. Gunther wouldn't have had to gotten pinned. So I figured, oh, maybe Drew will just pin Sheamus. That's not where they went with it. They, in fact, let Gunther retain, which in retrospect was the right move. And now he's on the verge, or I believe he's one of the longest reigning Intercontinental Champions of all time, if not the longest reigning. I believe he has surpassed the Honky Tonk Man. He's now the longest reigning champion. And now you leave yourself wondering, well, if Drew didn't finish him, if Sheamus didn't finish him, who will end Gunther's streak? Could it be Chad Gable? He's had some good matches with Gunther this year, and he certainly deserves a good push. But I think by this point, because of how well they've built up Gunther and built up his reign, I think anyone who does win the match, does beat Gunther, they will have instant credibility because of this win over a guy who's been champion for almost a year and a half now. So I'm very curious to see who beats Gunther, but this was an amazing match. Now let me take a quick sip of tea before I continue my list. The next match on my list, back to AEW. And I believe now we're in our top 5 almost. So top 6. So the next match back in AEW, back with the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. This is he versus MJF on March 5th at Revolution in the Iron Man match for MJF's World Championship. Up until this point, I really felt like MJF's world title reign was a little disappointing. It wasn't befitting of an AEW title reign, in my opinion. And then Bryan Danielson pulled this match out of MJF. You know, I wouldn't even think that's fair to say that he pulled it like he forced MJF to have this match. Bryan Danielson is one of the best layout men in pro wrestling. He knows how to lay out a great, exciting match. But MJF absolutely held his own. This was such an unbelievably great athletic event. Like, this is an endurance test to go for 60 minutes hard. Like I've mentioned on the show before that I roll Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we do sparring rounds, and I roll for like 6 minutes. I do 2 or 3 of those rolls. I'm like, man, I am done for the day. I'm like exhausted all day. I cannot imagine the amount of stamina required to go 60 minutes hard, like to really, really no breaks, no water, just plowing through. And Bryan Danielson doing this, you know, not necessarily 100% here. And so all the credit in the world to him, all the credit in the world to MJF, because, you know, he could have been intimidated. He could have not pulled his end of the bargain, but he did. And it was ranked maybe the best Iron Man match. I believe Dave Meltzer credited it as the best Iron Man match that he had ever seen. And while I haven't seen too many Iron Man matches, this was absolutely up there. This match is where I truly started taking MJF seriously as a world champion. And I give credit to him and Danielson for doing that and accomplishing that, because without this match, I'm not sure that MJF would have the credibility that he does at the moment. Nor would I think it would have helped his face turn where he is right now. Then back to WrestleMania. And this is the last time you'll see WrestleMania on the card. We have the main event of WrestleMania. Now, you know, I was struggling to decide, do I want to pick the Usos versus Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, or do I want to pick Cody versus Roman? And I ultimately went with Cody versus Roman, because this was the more memorable match for me. Now, it's Cody versus Roman Reigns. Cody's talking about finishing his story. I'm rooting for Cody. I'm ready for Roman Reigns to lose his title. I genuinely thought at this point that Roman Reigns was going to lose and Cody was going to win, because it was just the story they seem to have been telling. I remember talking to my friend Rodney and being like, yeah, I'm certain. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if he's going to win. I think Roman's going to win. I'm like, you're crazy. It's definitely Cody. I was so sure of this. And I think a lot of WWE fans were so sure of this. And while many people question the result of this match, in the moment when it was happening, the smart mark that I am, the inside wrestling fan that I am, I could not help but get lost in the moment. I couldn't help but think, wow, this is it. Cody's going to do it. Cody's going to win. He was doing the Shatter, I forget his finisher, whatever it is. What the hell is his finisher? You know, the inverse DDT. He did one of them. He did 2 of them. He's going up to do 3 of them. And I'm like, what? Well, 3, you know, who's going to kick out of this? This has to be it. And just as I thought that, of course, Solo Sikoa shows up with the thumb, bing, bang, boom, it's over. I got mad. And because I got mad, I gave WWE so much credit, because I normally am indifferent. I'm neither mad nor sad. I'm just like, that was great. Like, I acknowledge the writing of the moment, but very rarely do I get caught up in the moment. And when I do, that is, in my opinion, wrestling at its best for me. And so I love this match. I loved the ending, even though I wanted Cody to win. I loved how WWE got me. They got me to mark out. So I give them all the credit. And look, while the summer was very, very weird from a storytelling perspective for WWE, because it would have been cooler if Cody was champion, especially since Roman wasn't even around, I think now heading into WrestleMania 40, the potential rematch seems like a much bigger deal. Plus, we now have Roman versus CM Punk, possibly Roman versus The Rock. There's way, way more interesting marquee matches at the moment with Roman Reigns as champion than Cody. And I would say that Cody really didn't lose much by losing the match. He's the most popular wrestler in WWE. He's got the most wins of the year in WWE. He's been protected like crazy. He beat Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. So he's only looking stronger going into the Royal Rumble and going into WrestleMania. So I'm very curious to see how they finish his story. Now we have a match that happened actually pretty recently. It was at Full Gear on November 18th. And this is, in fact, the bloodiest, most vicious match you will see on the card, or you will see on my lineup of matches. It's the Texas Death Match with Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page. This match started. Now, this match is a grudge feud. Swerve broke into Hangman's house, tried to mess with his child. Hangman wants to kill this guy, right? Like just in the story. So, what better way to convey that Hangman hates Swerve Strickland and wants to kill him than by finding an industrial stapler under the ring and literally stapling staples into Swerve? It was disgusting. I thought it was too far. I was just like, this is like wrestling is supposed to be simulated violence. We're supposed to protect each other and make it look like it hurts much more. There's no way, I don't think, to simulate being stapled. The only way I was just like, okay, maybe it's just very, very thin staple, so it's not piercing too deep into his skin. But even still, even a millimeter is 1 millimeter more than I would ever agree to. And the turning point for me of when I thought it was too much to loving it was when Swerve beat up Hangman, got the stapler himself, and just started stapling himself to be like, I'm fucking crazy. This isn't doing anything. This isn't hurting me. You think it could hurt me? I'm Swerve Strickland. This is where Swerve reached the next level. We talked about where MJF reached the next level. This is where Swerve became a main eventer. This is where I thought Swerve needs to be the next AEW World Champion. This match was so good. It absolutely made Swerve Strickland. It reminded everyone why Hangman Adam Page is an AEW main eventer and maybe one of the best baby faces that they have. It reminded everyone that AEW needs to do more with Hangman Adam Page because when it comes to big matches, he always delivers. This isn't even the one great match that Hangman had. He had an equally vicious and disgusting death match with Jon Moxley earlier in the year, which I'm not including just for the sake of repetition. But these two guys could go. These two guys are perfect for each other. The amount of memes and story, like this was the match everyone was talking about after Full Gear. And this is a match that I feel like if somebody's like, oh, why do you like pro wrestling? Is it even fun to watch? Throw on this match and see how they react. And maybe they will understand what is so fun about the crazy world of pro wrestling when you show them this one. Then moving along, keeping it in AEW on October 1st, they premiered a new pay-per-view called Wrestle Dream, which was a tribute to Antonio Inoki. And my favorite match on that card, and maybe one of my favorite matches of all time, Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. This was a dream match that I've wanted to see for a very long time. Both wrestlers have won an equal amount of Best Technical Wrestler awards from the Wrestling Observer. In fact, Danielson won it so much when he retired, Meltzer renamed the award the Bryan Danielson Best Technical Wrestler Award, which Zack Sabre Jr. proceeded to win for like 4 or 5 years in a row until Danielson came back. And then the winner of the Bryan Danielson Best Technical Wrestler Award was Bryan Danielson. So these are two guys that know how to grapple, know catch as catch can. They know ring psychology. And, you know, a lot of times for me, it's hard to keep my attention with a wrestling match. I'll grab my phone. I'll see how people are reacting on Twitter. This was a match where I went out of my way to go and charge my phone so far away from me that it is without, like, I'd have to like go to the other room to get it. I was like, I'm not looking at my phone. The only thing I'm going to look at is the screen to watch Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. And that's exactly what I did. And I was blown away. I was blown away at how technical they were. They were doing all of these cool wrestling moves. They were doing jujitsu holds. And on top of that, the other wrestler would counter the hold, and then they would go somewhere else. It was like a beautiful grappling dance. Like they were dancing with each other, but with wrestling holds. You know what I'm saying? It was an unbelievable match. It was one of those matches that when the pinfall was counted, I was upset because I didn't want it to end. Like, this is the perfect match where I would be chanting "fight forever" because I would love to watch. I hope they fight at least one more time before Danielson properly retires this summer, because we as wrestling fans deserve another Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre match. I'm actually a little jealous because I went to the first Forbidden Door, which is where this match was originally scheduled to take place. And of course, Danielson got injured at the time and couldn't compete in the match. So I could have seen this live. That would have been incredible. I couldn't see it live. Hopefully I'll see the next iteration live. But if you haven't seen it, this is definitely a match to go out of your way to check out. Next match is the best match. We're now in the top two, folks. This is the top two matches of the year. Dun, dun, dun. This was my favorite WWE match of the year on my favorite WWE event of the year. And if you were paying close attention earlier, you know that event was WWE Backlash in Puerto Rico. I love the Puerto Rican wrestling fans. This was the best audience to perform in front of. There was like 16,000 people in that stadium. They were going ape for everything. They were reacting. What else I thought was really cool is when someone threw a punch or did like a vicious move, the whole crowd would go, ooh, ooh, you know, or something like that. And it was a very distinct sound that you wouldn't hear anywhere else. And excuse me, the main event of that show was Bad Bunny versus Damien Priest. And honestly, like this is the match that I'm talking about, Bad Bunny versus Damien Priest. In a way, I'm like, my favorite moment of the match wasn't even the match. The part of the show that I keep going back to is the unreal entrance from Bad Bunny. I feel like that was the best moment in all of wrestling this year. The camera starts behind Bad Bunny. The first few riffs of his song Cambeo start playing. And then, you know, he comes out, the camera's behind him. And then you as the viewer are realizing, oh, this isn't a camera person behind him. This is a drone. And then the lyrics for the song Cambeo start playing, and the drone starts roaming into the audience. And the whole crowd is singing every single syllable of the song. I'm having goosebumps just talking about it. Watching it live was surreal. I feel like those people would kill for Bad Bunny. Like, if he got on the mic, he was like, everyone right now run into the ring and stomp and trample Damien Priest. The crowd would have done it. The crowd would have done anything he says. The crowd loved Bad Bunny. And as somebody who is skeptical about celebrities coming in from the outside world, Bad Bunny did it right. Bad Bunny is a legit fan, legit longtime fan, because he made sure when, you know, he knew the kind of sway that he had. So he was like, look, if we're doing a show in Puerto Rico, I want Savio Vega here. I want Carlito here. And they brought him in. They are going to do anything Bad Bunny wants. He's the most streamed musician in the world. Why wouldn't they do this? And so this match was so fun. It was a hardcore match, and all the credit in the world to Damien Priest here, because he's the veteran in the ring. Bad Bunny, he's a performer, he's an entertainer, but he only has so much experience with pro wrestling. He needs to be kind of shown the way, and someone has to take all of his offense. And look, Damien Priest is like 2 heads bigger than Bad Bunny. Even still, it was a believable exhibition. And of course, the best part about it was the crowd. The crowd was all about Bad Bunny. They gave the crowd exactly what they wanted. The crowd was so pumped. And seriously, if nothing else, I've told you to go back and watch these things. Just go back and watch the monumental entrance from Bad Bunny. I think we're going to be talking about this in like a decade, in 20 years. Like when there's going to be these lists of best entrances of all time, Bad Bunny will be on every list because nothing compares to this moment in Puerto Rico for WWE. Now it's time for Raba's best match of the year. I know you're dripping with anticipation. What could it be? Is it a WWE match? Is it an AEW match? Is it a New Japan match? Is it something else altogether? Nope. It is, in fact, a AEW/New Japan match. My favorite match of the year is Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. Now, of course, they wrestled twice this year. They wrestled at Wrestle Kingdom on January 4th, and they wrestled at Forbidden Door on June 25th. I'm a little biased. I was at Forbidden Door on June 25th, and I really, really loved that match. It was the best match of Forbidden Door for me, was Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. Of course, Bryan Danielson wrestled at Forbidden Door as well. He faced Okada. But by that point, I had been so fatigued, and also, since Danielson injured himself, he did like this fake seizure angle to give himself a few minutes. That completely took me out of the match, where I started worrying about him, like genuinely as a human being. And I couldn't get back into the match for the last 5 minutes of it. And it just spoiled the whole thing for me. Whereas the Kenny Omega Will Ospreay match, I was in. That was me acting like a 10-year-old kid being like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so that gets the edge for me. And if I'm being honest, the match that they had at Wrestle Kingdom was a much more exciting, grand main event match. The follow-up wasn't quite as good. Plus, Kenny Omega won the Wrestle Kingdom match. I didn't really like, that was the other thing, I didn't really like that in the Forbidden Door match, Ospreay won with cheating. Not that I'm against cheating, it just took away from the match's, greatness a little bit, because it was more of a storyline advancement than an athletic advancement. And I just loved the Wrestle Kingdom match. It had a different vibe. I guess the main reason that gets the little bump for me is because Kenny Omega in New Japan, I have such fond memories of that moment in time. And that was when I really fell in love with Kenny Omega and when he became my favorite wrestler. And so this was his first match back in New Japan since AEW had started 4 years prior. And it was very nostalgic for me, hearing the old Kenny Omega Bullet Club theme, him having the full hair extensions back. Like, he knows how big of a deal it was to be back in Japan. And that was just such a great match. And that match itself is like, this is why I'm a wrestling fan. This is why I still watch wrestling, for incredible feats of athleticism such as this. And so that's my match of the year, Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay at Wrestle Kingdom. My favorite match of the year happened 4 days into 2023, which is sometimes the case. That's why it's so wild. Wrestle Kingdom always every year happens January 4th. It's New Japan Pro Wrestling's big event of the year, their WrestleMania. And in a way, it's like the wrap up to the previous year and a kickoff to the new year. But it technically happens in the new year. Like, this year's Wrestle Kingdom is January 4th, 2024. So it's going to be for next year. But it's closing out all the angles from this year. So it's like a big in-between. But the Kenny Omega match was very much the top match of the year. There is, of course, still one event left in 2023, and that's AEW World's End, which is this weekend. And the full lineup hasn't been released yet. I'm sure on Dynamite they're going to really stack it up. But we do have some matches so far, and it looks like a really good card. I'm definitely going to be watching live. I'm excited. I'm excited that there is a pay-per-view in the last weekend of the year. This used to be what WCW would do with Starrcade. And I feel like it was sorely missed, especially because WWE doesn't do a big pay-per-view in December anymore, since they just go from Survivor Series to Royal Rumble now. So this is a very welcome change, a very smart move by AEW. The lineup so far is the AEW World Champion MJF defending against Samoa Joe. That should be really fun. They're in Long Island. The crowd's going to go crazy for MJF. The Continental Classic finale, which this whole month of AEW programming has been so fun to watch, specifically because of the Continental Classic. You're going to have either Jon Moxley, Swerve, or Jay White take on either Bryan Danielson or Eddie Kingston. I'm assuming we're going to get Moxley versus Kingston. Or we can get Jay White versus Kingston. But I think Swerve is going to be facing Keith Lee based on how they're doing certain angles. And it would be cool to see Danielson in the finals. So I do want Danielson to fight. Maybe we'll see. But I feel like Eddie Kingston needs to make it to the end because he's defending his titles. So we'll see. Toni Storm versus Rio for the AEW Women's Championship. I can't see Toni losing here because she's just having a moment. Allegedly, the World Tag Team Championships are going to be on the line with Starks and Big Bill against Chris Jericho and a partner of his choosing. This was originally supposed to be Kenny Omega in this spot, but tragically, Omega has diverticulitis. He was apparently on death's door. So all the best wishes to Omega for a quick and speedy recovery. The TNT title is on the line in a no DQ match, Christian versus Adam Copeland. This has been a fun angle. I'm curious where this goes, but I imagine Copeland would win this one. The TBS title is Julia Hart versus the Living Dead girl, Abaddon. I'm so glad Abaddon is getting a push finally. Abaddon's one of the more unique characters AEW has, and I think the Abaddon character can go very, very far. And finally, Hook versus Wheeler Yuta in an FTW rules match for the FTW Championship. I'm guessing Hook does not leave without the gold here. Anyway, this is going to do it for me for 2023. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me, listen to me rant for 40 minutes here about my favorite matches of the year. In the comments, let me know about your favorite matches of the year, or shoot me an email, squaredcirclepit@gmail.com. Until then, I'll be back next week with a full recap, a review, and analysis of AEW World's End. I hope you can join me.